On today's episode of the Brewing Fiction Podcast, we are thrilled to welcome science fiction and fantasy writer Hannah Greer. We will be delving into the details of Hannah's writing journey and shedding light on her experiences along the way. We'll also discuss the advantages of writing short fiction, a format that is becoming more popular in today's literary landscape. Also, you'll hear of valuable resources where aspiring writers can submit their work to online publications, opening doors to new opportunities and potential audiences. So grab your favorite brew, sit back and relax. It's time for the Brewing Fiction Podcast. And welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Especially you, Heather, back from a very busy couple of weeks celebrating high school grad. Great to have you back.
Thanks. Good to be back.
Awesome. I'm also very excited to introduce today's guest, science fiction and fantasy writer, Hannah Greer. Hey, Hannah.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Hey,
Hi,
it's
Hannah.
Our pleasure. So before we go any further, I understand that you both have worked together before, right? Heather, why don't you start us off with how you know Hannah, and then we'll let Hannah step into Author's Corner, where she can tell our listeners a little more about herself.
So for our listeners that don't know me, I'm the COO and editor-in-chief of Fiction Ain't Me Publishing. And I guess a couple of years ago, we did our second contest. We did like a science fantasy contest, and we got 25 amazing authors to publish out of a pool of almost 100 submissions. And Hannah was our second place winner. Hey. And believe me when I say we agonized over who was going to be first and second between Hannah and our first place winner, Tracy. Those two stories are just incredible. So we have worked together. I've worked as her editor, and now we work together actually as editors in the Fiction Writer's Den on Medium.
Look at you too.
Hannah's publishing at Medium on Medium a lot too. So we've sort of joined up over there as well. So
awesome.
Very excited to have you, Hannah.
Yes, thank you. That was so kind.
This is our Author's Corner. So this is just a little spot here where you can tell us anything you would like to tell us about you.
Okay, well, like y'all said, I write mostly sci-fi and fantasy. I have several short story publications in magazines and anthologies. I volunteer as a first reader for a speculative magazine. And like you said, I recently became an editor for the Fiction Writer's Den on Medium. Aside from writing, I do combat sports. I've competed in BJJ, combat jiu-jitsu, judo, kickboxing, sport, and combat sambo.
Wow.
That is so awesome.
Yeah, it's really fun. I really enjoy it. It's a nice hobby aside from writing, because writing takes up so much creative energy. It's nice to do something a little more physical.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then I have 3 cats and a small flock of pigeons, which you may hear the cats in the background occasionally.
Cool. So you have pigeons.
Yeah.
So how many pigeons? Like you said, a small flock. How many?
Yes. So I have 3 right now.
Oh, I love birds.
How does that work? Pigeons, are they kept outside? Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, so when I first got them, I actually rescued one when he was about 2 weeks old. He was getting bullied by other pigeons in his flock. So I took him home and hand-raised him. So they were inside for a couple months, but then I developed a hypersensitivity to them. So they had to move outside, and now they live in like a loft. It's about a room-sized little building for them to live in.
Okay, so next is our Fast Five. Keith, I did not prepare her for this section, so it's
awesome.
I've got my list, but it'll be off the cuff for her. So
it's fun.
All right.
Yeah, this is just a little bit of fun.
These are fun, and these are these are all like writing related, basically. So, so the first one is hero or anti-hero?
Anti-hero.
Yes, me too. What about you, Keith?
I think I have to go hero.
Hero.
Yeah.
I love they're both so good. Okay, so when you read, do you prefer a standalone novel or a series?
Ooh, that's definitely mood based. Recently, though, I'll say
Yeah.
standalone.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm a mood reader too, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So writing sprints or marathon writing sessions?
Probably marathon writing sessions.
Yeah. Do you ever do
Yeah.
the writing sprints like using the bots on Discord or anything like
Yes,
that?
I do those more when I'm working on novels,
Mhm.
because they're good for just like getting the words down and then coming back later. But when
Right.
it's short stories, sometimes I take a bit longer for getting it down.
Yeah, that makes
Okay.
sense. I used to do a lot of writing sprints when I was doing my serial for Mithril, and I had those weekly deadlines. So I had to
Oh,
really
yeah.
stay ahead of those deadlines. So
Yeah.
those writing sprints really help. But now I'm more of a marathon person, just normally.
hmm
Are you plot driven or character driven as a writer?
I would say character driven. Like I like plot, but characters are what make the story for me.
Yeah, and I can
I
tell
agree.
in your writing too, and I agree with that
Yeah.
wholeheartedly, 100%. And then the last one, do you like music when you write or silence
Silence. I do not write with music, like at all. I'm
at all,
impressed by
like
people
ever?
who can.
I
Yeah.
was
Yeah,
just going
and
to say, are you unable to, or you just choose not to?
Yeah, no, I can't focus enough to do it when there's music. I'll get distracted and stuff. So,
Is that
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of
Okay.
surprised that I can write with music. So for me, it helps to set that mood.
hmm
I'll put on a record, just that 10 minutes, 15 minutes is all one side takes to play, just to get set up. But then it's silence for me.
Yeah, I like that too. When I'm editing, though, it needs to be quiet.
Oh,
Is that
yeah.
right?
That's a whole different feeling.
So you can write, okay,
Mhm.
editing is just
I
that
can
much
write
different,
with music, but editing just has to be. I might be able
Interesting.
to do some like instrumental music in the background.
Because it feels like two different parts of your brain, writing versus editing. So,
It really does. It really
Huh.
does. So writing, I can just kind of let go and just kind of let all those ideas flow and let the music kind of inspire that. But editing, it's like you really have to focus. I feel like really laser focus on that.
yeah,
Music
definitely.
can be very distracting. Mm-hmm.
Would it depend on the genre of music for you,
Yeah,
Heather,
and
specifically?
yeah, genre, like, and the genre needs to fit the music that I pick, and like we talked about earlier about mood reading. I'm a mood writer, so certain scenes you want the music to be very dark and have a sort of foreboding sense to it, or you might want it to be more whimsical and
Mhm.
lighthearted, you know.
Nice. Sorry to go off track here, but is there a site where you can get mood music for your writing? Does anybody know that?
I think on Spotify, a lot of people make their own sort of playlist for different
Okay,
things,
yeah, I guess,
like,
right? Search it.
you know,
Yeah.
like sci-fi landscapes or, you know, whatever you want, more of an urban fantasy kind of vibe, you know.
That's a
I do
good
know
idea.
people that do that on Spotify, and maybe YouTube might have some collections like that.
Yeah, I use YouTube Music, so I'll have to search it up. I never even thought of searching for a theme type of thing, right? I just search artists and genres, but yeah.
Yeah, you
Cool.
could search for like a themed writing thing. All right,
Alrighty.
so let's get to our interview, Hannah.
Sounds good.
And we have our questions, but we do, as you can see, kind of go with the flow of the conversation, and then
Yeah.
Keith can work his editing in post-production and like cut out things if it gets too off track or whatever. But
Not that
cool,
that's ever
yeah.
happened. Never.
yeah, never, not
I
us.
No.
There's always so many wonderfully interesting things to talk about with everybody.
Right.
So Hannah, how long have you been writing?
So I've been writing a very long time, but not very seriously. Like when I was maybe 8 years old, I started handwriting my very first story. And it was just a silly thing about two dogs falling in love and having a bunch of puppies, and they go on little adventures and stuff. Yeah. And so I worked hard on that too. I would bring it everywhere with me, like to the zoo, everywhere. But as with a lot of writing projects, it's still currently unfinished and will probably remain that way forever.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That sounds like me and probably every other writer out there.
I was going to say maybe just
Right.
about everybody. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So writing has always been a passion for you. it
Yes,
sounds like.
definitely. But it definitely became more serious in about 2021. I got more serious about it. That's when I wrote my first novel. Because I'd been planning a novel all throughout high school, but I
Hmm.
was stuck in the planning phase with that.
Hmm.
And eventually I just had to realize that I had to let that story go, let it sit, and work on something else that I wasn't so emotionally invested in. And that's
Right.
how I actually was able to write a novel.
Oh,
Um,
that's great.
So
yeah.
you went to other projects and then it just marinated for a while and then you were able to finish?
No, that one is actually the one I planned all throughout high school is probably never going to be written.
Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
switched to an entirely different. I think the one in high school was like a dystopian, which we know that's not really in anymore anyway. And then in college, I ended up writing. I've written two fantasy novels throughout college. Yeah, they're at various states of finished, unfinished, but the first draft got done. So
Awesome. And that's
Nice.
such a huge step too, to get that first
yes,
draft done.
definitely.
It's
Yeah.
major. So
Mhm.
congratulations on having two. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
And we'll definitely get back to those novels and your works in progress in just a little bit, because we definitely want to
Mhm.
hear about those for sure. So when you finally did decide to get more serious about writing, what made you like actually get serious and say, I'm going to write, I'm going to publish what I write? Has that been more recent as well?
Yes, getting into publishing was only in the past, I think, like 2 years or so. I first started submitting short stories in 2022, I believe, end of
Uh-huh.
2022. So 2023 was the year that I was really serious about it. And I sent out a lot of submissions and had some luck with publications and stuff. Um, and it was actually a college writing class. It was a fiction workshop that got me to be more serious about short fiction. Because before that, like I said, I was getting more into novels and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But when I did those classes, I really enjoyed the short fiction and I really enjoyed the community and critique process with those. So I liked those
Yes.
stories, and so I got more researched more about like how would I go about getting these published and that kind of stuff.
Right. And so 2023 is when you published with us at Fictionate. So that sounds like when everything really started to ramp up for you at that point. And you had something in Radon Journal right around that same time, right?
I had something in the Dread Machine in May of 2023, and then the Radon one was actually earlier this year, January.
Mm,
So yeah, but my first
okay,
publication
awesome.
in like a magazine was also in 2023, and then the anthology with you guys.
Right. So how do you think that writing short fiction has helped you improve as a writer? Because like you, I was always sort of, okay, my whole goal was to write and publish a novel. And I had never really ever thought of myself as a short story writer. I was a poet or I was going to be a novelist or both. And short fiction changed so many things for me. So, how has that helped you grow as a writer?
But I think it's helped like with the emotional side of writing because you can have success with short stories a lot sooner than having success with
Yes.
novels because they're
Hmm.
so long
Yes.
and so intensive. So it's um that gratification of having something out and published really
Hmm.
helps you feel like, huh, maybe I don't suck as an author. Wow, who knew?
Yes. It
um,
is. It's that
yeah.
it's almost an instant gratification, even though sometimes you have to wait up to 3 months to ever hear back from some of the magazines. It's such a great feeling. And when you're accepted, it gives you this huge boost of confidence to say, this editor that I don't know this person. They think my writing is good enough to be in their magazine. And it does help propel you to keep working on, your short fiction.
Yes, definitely.
So yeah,
And I
that's
think
a
it
really
also
great point.
And it also helps on like the technical side with figuring out like what kinds of themes I'm interested in exploring and what I would
Hmm.
want to like explore over months and months with a novel. And
Hmm.
Right.
like, yeah, figuring out character focused versus plot focused and all those little things that go into a novel.
Right, exactly. So, like, have you ever like had a novel idea where you're like, oh my God, this would be so amazing, and then you kind of hashed it out as a short story, and then realize there's no way you would ever be able to write a whole novel on this idea.
I've kind of had the opposite where I've written short stories and then realized, this could be fun to expand into a novel. Because most of my ideas, I feel like, do start as short story ideas.
Right.
And then it's just like, wow, there's a lot of room in this world and in these characters to expand.
Exactly. And I find that as well. And even a, 100-word travel, you can write that and just know, okay, at some point, this will become a much bigger story. You just feel it. You just know.
I would think that would probably be more natural to grow from a short story idea versus the other way where you dive into novel and then you don't have enough material, so you'll just say, okay, it'll be okay as a short story. It would be more natural the other way, I think, right? It would expand.
Yeah. I think for some people,
yeah.
But for some people never really do write short fiction, and they only write novels.
Yeah.
I think writing short fiction, I think we do have sort of a leg up when we do want to shift our focus into something longer.
For sure.
Like Hannah said, you can play around with so many different genres, feedback a lot faster. You can get published a lot faster. You can get paid pretty quickly if you publish on Medium.
Right.
So, a lot of pros to writing short fiction.
Agreed. Yeah.
So who are some of your biggest influences? Who are some of your favorite authors that have influenced your writing, Hannah?
So for novels, I would say Laura Sebastian. So with novels, I do more YA fantasy. And she writes absolutely amazing YA fantasy. They're always super intricate. Awesome. They have the romance, the world building, the political structure is really interesting. So that's like something to aspire to. Yeah. And another, I also really loved Jasmine Sky's recent debut novel, Daughter of the Bone Forest. It's really unique and not something that would have been published like 10 years ago even.
Yeah.
And it helped me think like, okay, you need to stop worrying about whether publishing will accept this or that and just write the story and let that fall where it may.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I've heard of Daughters of the Bone Forest, and I've heard wonderful things about it. And I love that advice. I think I feel like I see as an editor a lot of writers who want to write for the market instead of writing what is calling to them from their soul, and I always say, don't worry about, is this marketable or can I ever get it published? There is always a home for a story somewhere. I say, write it. If it's weird and strange, do it. Because you never know. You could be that person who blazes trails for a whole new genre or style of writing or something.
Yeah. And trends are always changing. So if it's not in now, it may be in 5 years or something by the time you're finished with the novel.
For sure.
Right. Exactly. I mean, like you said, now dystopia is kind of, because we're everybody's so tired of that hopelessness. So now we're gearing more towards solar punk and eco punk, where you have this sort of, hope about the future, and that's really cool to see that shift. So you've been published in quite a few magazines and our Fictionate anthology. So as someone who's been published, you've been out there, you've been around the block. What is some advice you have for somebody who's writing and they're ready to submit, but they just don't feel confident enough to do it yet? What would be your advice to them to just go out there and do it?
So I have a few thoughts about this. So what you kind of have to get used to with especially short stories and stuff is that rejection is going to be normal and it's not personal. Not every editor is going to love your story, but sometimes it's just not the right fit for the magazine and the editor may have really loved it.
Exactly.
And you have to get used to that idea that rejection is not a rejection of you or even signaling that the story is bad. It's just part of the industry and part of getting published. For example, last year I submitted 108 times and I was accepted 3 times. So the rest of those were all rejections. And then,
Right.
but it does get better as you go on and you get used to the markets and you know what they want and you know how your stories fit into that. Because
Right.
this year I've submitted so far 97 times and I've already had like double the acceptances.
Right.
So it does
Awesome.
get better as you go on. It's just, you have to get started to be able to get better.
Right.
Yes, that's great. That's really great advice. And I love what you said about when an editor rejects your story, doesn't mean they're rejecting you.
Yes.
And as somebody who has had to go through so many different submissions to pick out the best of the best to publish, you have a limited number you can publish. There are stories we have to pass on, and you feel bad, but like you said, it has to fit your brand, it has to fit your publication or the theme of the contest or the anthology you're submitting to, whatever. So it doesn't mean that your writing is bad. And I love to read all of those rejection stories of all the famous authors who were rejected. Frank Herbert was rejected how many times? And I think on editor number 30, he finally got it published or something. And, it's crazy. You just have to keep at it. You can't stop.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have to make that first step, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So for our listeners out there who are at that point, Hannah and Heather, either of you sound like you have a lot of knowledge on it. Where does a person start looking for publications and magazines and those kinds of things?
I actually recommend using the Submission Grinder. It's a website that keeps track of like a ton, practically all of the magazines and anthologies and stuff that are open to submissions, and you can use it. Takes a little getting used to the search engine and everything, but once you get used to it, you can find open markets for pretty much any kind of story you have.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for that.
Yes. And that's really good. And I've found a lot just personally as a writer on Instagram.
Oh, yeah.
Once I started following a couple of publications, then they just start really showing up in my feed. And that is also a good way to find newer publications who are very open to new writers. So new writers out there who are looking for publications where you don't necessarily have to have a lot of street cred, so to speak, that are very open to new writers. Instagram or social media in general, because usually they're on Facebook as well, Twitter. Find these newer publications and submit to those, and you can build lasting relationships with some of these newer magazines. So that is in Submission Grinder. We'll need to put that link on the website,
We will
too.
Indeed. Yeah, I
help.
made note of that for sure.
Yeah,
great. Thank
awesome.
you.
So we know that you like to write science fiction and fantasy. Why do these genres specifically appeal to you?
So with the novels, I enjoy the YA fiction because it's great for like just disconnecting and relaxing. And then for the short stories, I like sci-fi specifically because, well, there's a market for sci-fi and short fiction, which with novels, there's not as big of a market. And I love the themes that come to the surface in sci-fi because there's so many things you can explore that relate to our current world, but just a little different, I really enjoy the kind of things you can explore in science fiction that you can't really explore in other genres.
Right. And like you said, it usually end up being, it doesn't read like fiction. It's almost like cautionary tales. Like how many things have come true that we've read in science fiction, and now it's like really happening. That is really interesting, and that disconnect from reality is always a really big plus. I think it is for most people that do tend to read genre fiction. It's get me as far away from reality as possible.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's what I love about fiction versus nonfiction. Let's just go somewhere.
Yeah, go somewhere completely different.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just need a break. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, exactly.
On the next episode of the Brewing Fiction podcast, Hannah will discuss the allure of science fiction and fantasy writing. We'll also talk about the significance of finding a supportive writing community to foster your growth as a writer, as well as the impact of drabbles in flash fiction. You'll get a chance to hear an excerpt from Hannah's story, The Way the Stars Glow, which appears in the short fiction collection titled Unmoored, Worlds of Pure Chaos, from Fictionate Me Publishing. Tune in for this and much more in Episode 2 with Hannah Greer. Stop by the podcast homepage for links to today's guest and to see what else is brewing on the Brewing Fiction podcast. You can find the links in the description. And don't forget to click the subscribe button to be notified whenever a new episode is released.